here with Peter Mangione. We're the co-directors of the Program for Infant-Toddler Care. And we've been asked to introduce this continuity of care video. We're thrilled to be here because this is a topic of incredible importance. For many years, continuity of care has been one of our 6 essential program qualities at PITC. And what Peter and I are going to do today is talk a little bit about the research, a little bit about the definition, and a little bit about why we think continuity of care should be practiced.
When we started the PITC, as Ron mentioned, it's very important to have these 6 essential qualities or program practices in place, program policies in place. And when we think about those policies, primary care, that is establishing a primary relationship for each baby or toddler in group care, small groups so that you can have intimacy and responsiveness in the interaction, individualization of care, inclusion of children with special needs, and culturally responsive care, all of those 5 policies hinge on continuity of care, because if you've made the effort to do all that, to have culturally responsive care, to individualize, to establish a primary relationship, to have a small group, but you don't keep it together, the benefit to those young children, to those babies and toddlers, is lost.
One of the reasons that we are so much advocates of continuity of care is the attachment research. Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth have shown that young babies, infants, need to bond with someone, and they need someone who they can be around and go, I'm safe here, I'm nurtured, this person is looking out for me. Well, what we've seen in the research of Carol Lee Howe and Helen Rakes is that same thing is true in infant-toddler care. That having children have a primary caregiver, someone who they are with as their major provider, not exclusive, but just primary, and have that relationship have the ability to deepen over time, allows the child to feel much more secure in care. And what Carol Lee Howe has found is that there's less aggression and less insecurity. And with a high-quality caregiver, Helen Rakes has found that these children are actually more securely attached than children without a high-quality caregiver.
If we think about it from the point of view of the baby, as Ron's comment suggested, from the point of view of the baby, what we have is that the baby needs emotional security, and the baby needs to learn through relationships. That's the way the baby comes into the world. And when that baby enters group care, those fundamental needs don't change. To get emotional security, the first thing that the baby really seeks from us, that comes from the relationship. And once you've established that emotional security, then you use that as a base for learning and exploration. And that's the way we support healthy brain development. So it makes perfect sense if you're a baby going into care to expect that you're going to form a relationship, that you can depend on that predictable, responsive relationship, and you know that it's going to be there when you really need it.
So when we were putting PITC together, we were going after a setting and policies that would ensure the best for the baby. And what were we trying to get? We were trying to get an intimate setting where the child was cared for, where they could seek out and form a relationship and have that relationship grow over time. That relationship would be with a responsive caregiver who looks at the child's needs and in a stimulating and safe environment. When all of these attributes are taken together, one of the things that really is prime to making that happen is the continuity of the relationship between the child and their caregiver. You have a primary caregiver. That caregiver is assigned to a child, deals with that child's parents, knows that child's needs and temperaments, has that child, is a child available to that child if the child bumps themselves and looks for somebody to nurture them, they're there. And that relationship lasts for a while, as we know from the attachment research. When you transition from caregiver to caregiver to caregiver, that attachment is ruptured. When you have time for it to build, it deepens. Once it's deepened, the child can use that as the base for learning and communication. And so one of the things that we're thrilled about in this video is that we are going to be seeing infant care teachers who have tried this out and are going to talk about both the benefits to the child, the family, and to them.
Continuity works in our classroom, very simply by keeping the same group of children together, keeping the same teachers together, to minimize the number of transitions to the lowest number possible.
That comes to mind about the continuity of care is we also practice primary caregiving, and we also have small groups. The three main parts of continuity of care. So primary caregiving, small groups, and the continuity of care.
Continuity is about building those relationships not only with the caregiver but also with the group of peers, because that is equally important, especially as the child transitions through the program. Continuity is having that relationship with the parent, with the child, and moving on with them. So even as they're maybe having that scary change from one classroom to the next, they still have consistency as well.
I think it is all about the relationships and the bonds that you can build with these children, and it helps them feel more secure while they're here and they're away from mom. And for some, that can be really rough on them. So if they have a constant person in their life while they're here, I think that just makes them feel more secure.
So we're talking about a combination of things here. We're talking about primary caregiver assignments. We're talking about small groups. We're talking about personalized or individualized attention to a child. All of those things are emphasized and bumped up a notch or two with continuity of care, because what happens is you have longer to get to know the child, and in a small group, you have fewer children to get to know. I'd like to define continuity of care according to the way PITC thinks of it. Continuity of care is continuous care where a primary caregiver who is assigned to the baby when the baby comes in stays with that caregiver for the first 3 years of life. If they move to a different setting, the children in this primary caregivers group move with the primary caregiver to that new setting. Or if they stay in the same setting, the caregiver rearranges the environments as the children develop. What we don't see is children changing caregivers, being graduated from one class to the other, or moving arbitrarily from group to group to group because that's the policy of the center. What we're trying to do is keep relationships together and keep established relationships continuing to grow.
When I started working as an aide at the center where I was working, they didn't do continuity of care yet. And so every year, the children would move into a new classroom with new teachers, and the teachers would talk beforehand. They'd discuss the children beforehand, but you don't know those children at all. And so that transition was rough on the teachers, it was rough on the children, and every year you were starting from scratch. Every year you were starting a new job, effectively. The center was the same, the room was the same, you might change a few things around to spruce it up a little bit, but the new children really made a huge difference in how everything worked. I mean, they're all independent, they're all individuals, and you can't really get to know them. And it takes almost a year to really get to know a group of children really
One
well.
of the things that really comes out to my mind is how it has helped children form secure attachments. Yes, the secure attachments really provide the children to trust the caregivers, and also because of that secure attachment they are able to go out and venture and explore and make relationships with others in such a secure way. That secure base is already there for the
And
child.
you think back to, the theories that you learn in school, and you think back to Maslow, and you think back to Erickson. They talk about the importance of trust and children needing to develop trust, and they talk about the children's need to belong and feel loved. And so it seemed very natural to us that this was what was best for young children.
When you hire a new teacher, what things can you expect? And you can expect for their first year to be difficult for them, because they're going to be stressed out, because they're not going to know the routine, they're not going to know the center, they're not going to know the co-teachers and everything. And so you really have to help them through that first year. And, well, imagine if, as a child, you were starting every year that way. And so you never got comfortable. You never got like you felt like you were fitting
The
in.
most important thing that comes to mind is the relationship that I have with the child and the child's family. That, to me, is, I think, the foundation of everything for that child. And the strong bonds that I have created with the family and with the child goes a long way in the child's growth and development. I think that is the foundation for all future learning and development too.
When they implemented continuity of care, they implemented it, and the room I was in was a group of 1-year-olds, and I actually stayed with them until they were 4.5.
After having worked with infants and toddlers in the continuity of care method, these relationships are not just relationships that last while the child is in the center, but it goes beyond. Even after the babies have grown into preschoolers and they've gone into kindergarten and public school, we still keep up the relationship. So they are almost like lifelong relationships. So the bonds that we have created here lasts a lifetime.
Those bonds are still there, and they're going to last. And I talk to the families, we run into each other in the community, and the bonds that you make, given that much time and that much effort and influence and just working with those children and those families for so long, are amazing. And they're phenomenal. Being able to know those children so well that you can anticipate where they're going next, what they're going to do next, where things are going. When you've been with children for 2.5 years, you can sit down in a room, look around, and say, all right, this is where we're going. This is what we need to do next. By the time these children left my care and went to preschool, being a teacher was so almost easy.
One major study that indirectly suggests the importance, the significance of continuity of care is the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development longitudinal study, in which they looked at babies entering group care at 3 months of age and followed those children for many, many years. And what they found was there are essentially 4 groups of children. There were those children who got into their sample. It was a 10-city study across the United States. Those children who were in emotionally secure attachment relationships at home. Often they ended up in a group care situation in which it was chaotic. Large groups, high turnover, pretty disorganized for that child. Those children did okay. They had that buffer of that secure relationship at home. the second group of children were children who were emotionally secure at home, and they were the fortunate ones to get into high-quality infant-toddler care. For those children, they had small groups, they had stable relationships, stable, predictable relationships in care. They did well. And when I say did well, their language development developed as we would expect. Their ability to engage in problem solving, to persist at solving problems and organize their behavior was where we would expect developmentally. So they were doing fine. The next group that was in that sample was a group of children who at home, for one reason or another, didn't have a secure relationship at home, didn't have a secure attachment relationship. But they were also lucky to be in group care that was high quality, and they had that kind of stable, predictable relationship and formed an emotionally secure attachment in group care. That group of children was doing okay developmentally. Then there was the group that didn't have either. At home, they didn't have an opportunity to develop an emotionally secure relationship, and in care, they went into poor quality care. Again, what's poor quality? Large groups, a lot of turnover, instability, chaos, unpredictability, no opportunity to form that emotionally secure relationship that has a long-term payoff for you. Those children, they weren't progressing with language as we would expect and hope. They weren't progressing in those cognitive kinds of skills around problem solving and persistence that are related to self-regulation. So what we see is that when we can provide that kind of relationship experience outside of care, we can benefit all children, and that's what we want to do. But we can especially benefit those children who, for one reason or another, may not be having the opportunity for developing that kind of emotionally secure relationship at home.
One of the things that we have to remember about continuity of care is that it's not a magic potion. It's continuity of care with a knowledgeable, responsive caregiver, a caregiver who knows how to engage a child, read their cues, understand their temperament. So what we're talking about is a long-time relationship in a quality experience. It isn't just if you're with a caregiver for a long time, that'll be fine. That can be as damaging as some of the things that Peter had said about care that was incomplete at home.
And I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind, as Ron was suggesting, it's not continuity for continuity's sake, but continuity of primary relationships in which the caregiver is knowledgeable about the child, is knowledgeable about high-quality group care, is knowledgeable about how to be responsive with infants and toddlers, and very emotionally invested in connecting with the children. That's a factor that's important. Ron had referred to Carol Lee Howe's research, and in one study, she identified 3 factors that would contribute to children forming an emotionally secure relationship in care. One factor is that you have a primary relationship. There is someone special who you can relate to, who's really making that connection with you and caring from you day after day, week after week, month after month. The second factor was that once you have that kind of relationship in care, it keeps going for you. With that same person over time. It builds over time, so you get to know each other really well, and you learn together, and the subtleties of learning language and the subtleties of sharing life together, you can engage in with that person. But the third factor was that the caregivers who formed these secure attachments with the babies and toddlers, they were emotionally invested in the children. They opened themselves emotionally and formed that kind of relationship. And when we're talking about a relationship in care, I often remember the words of Jeree Paul, who's formerly the director of the infant parent program at University of California, San Francisco, and a PITC faculty member. Jeree talked about, in care we offer babies and toddlers warm relationships, and those warm relationships can provide emotional security for babies. That's different from hot relationships that you get at home with your family, that intense relationship. Those are also important for babies and toddlers, but we have an opportunity to provide a very special kind of relationship to children in which they can become attached with us if we have things set up so that that relationship can develop over time.
One of the things that we did, we actually, before we implemented continuity of care, we had a meeting with families, essentially families that were already in our program, that we opened it up to anybody who was interested, and families who had maybe infants or toddlers at that point, or families who were planning to have infants and toddlers. So we took this as an opportunity to really start spreading the word about what we mean by continuity of care. Some families had been enrolled in programs that said they were using continuity of care, but their experiences weren't positive. They had 2 caregivers in a classroom, and their child's infant classroom, and one of the caregivers moved with the children. Well, their child's favorite caregiver wasn't the one who moved. So we had families who were concerned about how are you going to implement continuity of care. So we had a meeting to share, this is how we're going to do it. These teachers and these children are going to stay together for 3 years. And as much as we can, even the hourly aides that we hire to go in the classrooms will stay with those children for those 3 years as well. So, and I think that really helped to alleviate a lot of the parents' concerns. We continue to have some questions about, isn't it better for my child to, when they go to elementary school, they have to get used to changing every year. So isn't it better for them to start now to get used to that idea? Isn't it better for them to get used to transitions? And no, they won't like it, but at least they'll be used to it by then.
In our experience working with PITC demonstration programs in California, we would start with a program. Each one was based in a children's center at a community college campus. And with each of those programs, when we would first meet with the staff and the director, and this is years ago, of course, and talk about continuity of care and primary care and small groups, they could think about primary care. That made sense to them right away. In fact, most of those programs already were practicing primary care in one form or another. They could, within the resources they had, have small groups and keep rooms divided up, so you didn't even, they weren't in the school of thought that as long as we had the right ratio, it was fine. So if with those older toddlers 1 to 4 we had 16 with 4 caregivers. No, they understood that wasn't an ideal situation, that you needed the whole overall group to be smaller too. That was easy for them to think about, and in fact, most of the programs already were there. But the one policy that they stumbled over was continuity of care. The response was, how could we ever do this administratively? How could we ever figure this out? But they worked with us on it because they wanted to be a PITC demonstration program, and as we explored the concept with them, it was clear to them that relationship was very important to infants and toddlers. It made perfect sense to them, but they just couldn't see how to do it. I mean, there were some staff who said, I really like the babies, and that's who I want to be with. Some staff said, I really enjoy the toddlers. I like the give and take with the toddlers and providing the guidance and working with their needs for freedom but guidance. But then they said, okay, we'll try it. And they set it up and they tried it, and they made the transition. They worked with the families to let them know what they were doing. And over time, what happened was, after programs instituted it and were starting to demonstrate it as one of the PITC policies, the caregivers said we would never go back. Because that baby we got to know when that baby was a toddler, we just have this much more emotionally close relationship, and the guidance we can give and the responsiveness of the child was so much more connected from what we had experienced before.
Carlina Rinaldi from the Reggio Emilia School says, learning and loving is not as far apart as we used to think. And what she says, and they have continuity of care there. As a matter of fact, they have continuity of care throughout Europe. That is the norm there. It's not unusual in Europe. But what she says is, we need to have subjective relationships with babies, not objective relationships. We need to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt, be on their side, care for them, help them along. That's what they're looking for. That's what they're wired for. And it was very powerful when she talked about that, because I felt the ring of truth to it.
Across the country, there's been a tremendous interest in this topic of continuity of care. It's grown so much since we started the PITC. I remember, and I think Ron and I were fortunate not to have conducted this workshop, but I remember our first workshop at a PITC institute in which we had a workshop which we addressed continuity of care in primary care. This was way back in 1992. The people there were truly committed and engaged in infant toddler care. They were our leaders. They were the few who really got infant toddler care as distinct from preschool, understood the uniqueness of infancy. But when we presented the concept of continuity of care at that time, they said, look, we're doing everything we can to provide quality. The environment, the primary relationships, small groups, culturally responsive care, being inclusive. We're doing all those things. And now you're asking us to do this? This is crazy. We can't do this. We don't have the resources. It's impossible. And what I find now when I do that workshop here, 2 decades later, over 2 decades later, and as I go around the country and talk to people, everyone in the room says, yes, relationships are absolutely the starting point for infants and toddlers. And if we're serious about relationships, they have to be relationships that form and then are allowed to develop. And once you have them, you let them keep developing because of all the benefits that young child is going to get from that lasting, enduring relationship experience in care. People are in agreement about that now. And we do the workshop, everyone says, it's hard to do, but we're working on it. We want to get there. We go around the country, and people are really embracing the idea. I have the opportunity now where we've worked in numerous states, and of course we've had people from all 50 states and from other parts of the world too come to PITC training and explore these ideas with us, especially continuity of care. And in their home states, they're working on policies. There's a coalition of people from South Carolina, Indiana, New York, Colorado. The list goes on. And all of those states, all of those folks are committed to this topic and working together and learning together and trying to find ways to support this nationally, because it really is a national issue for infants and toddlers and their families. If we are serious about the long-term well-being of infants and toddlers, we have to put their relationship experiences first.
What we're dealing with are issues of attachment. Children are wired to connect to people. Without connecting, they would not survive. And when young ones go into care, this same drive for connection is part of them. What we're doing with continuity of care is kind of meeting a natural urge of the child to link so that they can say, somebody's here for me, I'm provided for, I'm safe. Now let me go out and explore the environment. Let me figure out in this relationship how I might talk to someone. And so what we're asking for here with continuity of care is a basic right of a young child who is relatively helpless to connect with someone.
It is a basic right from the point of view of the baby. You know, I think often what we do, and we certainly don't do this in a mean-spirited way or a way that we would intend any harm. We're trying to do the best we can in our field and working with limited resources. And I think it's important for us to honor the work of everyone who's caring for babies and where they are with caring for babies. And we always want to do better. but partly what we often end up doing when we set up care is ask babies to adapt to us, ask babies to adapt to our licensing regulation, ask babies to fit in with the way we have to make things work for financial reasons and various other reasons, regulations, of course, as I said before. And instead, I think what we want to do is think of it as a right of each young child, of the baby, that we would adapt to that child, to each one of those individuals, and meet that child's needs and connect with that child's drive to have a relationship with us and to use that relationship as a base for learning and exploration and learning how to regulate themselves as well as learning how the world works.